Hi, and welcome to my office, a place where even I haven't been in the past 7 months, but I'm incredibly happy to be here with you today recording this video. And what a crazy time this has been. A once-in-a-century pandemic, insane market volatility, and an incredibly divisive election. In fact, I record this video 2 weeks before November 3rd, and by the time you're watching it, we may still be wondering what the outcome will be. And yet, for all that's been going on, it's been one of the busiest times ever in the world of recruiting. Advisors and teams of all sizes have been changing firms and models, yet it's the movement of billion-dollar teams that's been the most extraordinary. And I'd like to read you some of the headliners since March. And I choose since March just because in the midst of a pandemic, since the pandemic began. So you've got, and again, these are just examples, just a few. Tom Freeman, from UBS to Wells Fargo FiNet in June with $1.6 billion. Matt Kilgore and Pete Francis from UBS to Dynasty Financial Partners, so that's independents, at $1.2 billion in June of this year. Doug Linker from Merrill Lynch to Rockefeller at $1 billion in June. Phil Scott, a real headliner, from Merrill to First Republic with $2.7 billion in August. John Hanley, Colin McKay, and Michael Francis from Goldman Sachs to UBS, $3 billion under management in August. Eric Glassband and team from Merrill to RBC, $1.4 billion in August. Michael Abrams and Joseph Yapala, Wells to Ameriprise with $7.1 billion under management in September. The Meltzer-Dunn team, headed by Louis Meltzer, Merrill PBIC to Morgan Stanley Private Wealth with $3.5 billion in September. And John Mikulski and Steve May from JP Morgan Chase to UBS with $6 billion in October. How is all of that even possible in the midst of a pandemic and such an uncertain time? It actually makes sense that advisors who were far along with their due diligence process, in the chute as I put it, would have made those moves. And in fact, it explains why February, March, and April were sort of quiet months because the quarantine was just beginning. But come May or June, people began to look at a time where they had more time, more privacy, and more ability to self-reflect, and really became more aware and more interested in exploring their options. So let's look at some of the things that are driving the movement. So one, the same frustrations that have existed for a long time. Nothing new as a result of the pandemic. Too much bureaucracy, bank heavy-handedness, management to the lowest common denominator, loss of control, loss of feeling valued. Two are the pushes and pulls. That's my term. What we talk about there are the pushes being the frustrations or the limitations that bother an advisor, and the pulls are what draws them to another firm or another model. Three, the third driver, would be an expanded industry landscape. And what that is, it tells you that there's more options and more likelihood that if an advisor is going to find his or her version of utopia. There's changing advisor sentiment, where advisors began and absolutely view their business as a business. And that sentiment went from valuing what is the biggest amount of upfront money or money I can get in the short term to where can I gain the most freedom, flexibility, and control. Next, speaking to Merrill advisors in particular, it's questions about whether in fact they will remain in protocol. Morgan and UBS pulled out 3 years ago, and the industry, I think, has been waiting for the other shoe to drop, meaning the Merrill shoe to drop. It's anybody's guess when and if that happens. And as I mentioned, now more time for self-reflection, to really take the time without running at 100 miles an hour, to really be aware and reflective of how they're feeling. And finally, a strong acknowledgement of self-reliance, that advisors began to realize, or are realizing, that they are reliant much less on the infrastructure that their firm provides them and much more able to function almost as an independent. And they have the privacy now to have conversations with other firms and to do their due diligence. Okay, So where are they all going? I guess one thing that this list certainly proves is that it's fractured. It's all over the place, from other wirehouses to regional firms to fully independent to boutique models like Rockefeller and First Republic and everything in between. Secondly, for sure, many of the moves, the biggest moves in the industry, were to independence, and it's become as mainstream an option as moving from UBS to Morgan. 3, and this is important, the ecosystem to support breakaway advisors is more robust than it's ever before. So it's easier to leverage capital and infrastructure and essentially a turnkey solution to get from there to here. 4, the new boutiques, as I call them, and probably most popularly First Republic and Rockefeller, are crushing it. It feels like every day we're reading about a multi-billion-dollar team heading that way. And those firms really filled a very important void. It's the void for advisors that wanted independence but felt that it was a bridge too far. And Rockefeller and First Republic allowed them to essentially get the benefits of independence with a big fat transition check without having to build something from scratch. 5, it's the new regional firms. It's not your grandfather's, your father's regional firms. The regional firms used to be also ran, so firms like RBC and Raymond James would never have captured multi-billion-dollar teams, but today they are regularly because they've leveled the playing field. And other than Merrill, Morgan, UBS, and Wells are very aggressively recruiting. So that's essentially my high-level industry update. But what I really want to share with you today is how to think about whether a move is appropriate. I wanted to give you an industry update because I think it's what advisors really yearn for. They want to understand what's going on. My message here is certainly not that everyone should make a move, for sure not. But to quote the song by The Clash, should I stay or should I go? That's the question. And my advice is that you be educated, that as this industry landscape has expanded, it's not enough to just presume that where you are is in fact the best place to service or run your business. But as a fiduciary, it's my belief that every advisor really has a responsibility to make certain that their firm is in fact the best place to serve their clients and grow their business. And as the leader of the team, to make sure that they're in the best place to run most efficiently and effectively. So how can you know the answers, whether or not you're in the best place, unless you have an understanding of the framework of how to think about the compare and contrast? The number one message I want to leave with you today is what I call begin with the end in mind. It's actually not my maxim. It's a maxim that was written about by Stephen Covey in one of his most famous books, probably one of my favorite books, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it, in fact, is a book that talks about how do the most effective people run their lives. Step 2 is begin with the end in mind. And what I mean by that, the way I counsel every advisor I work with, is that you begin with the end in mind. What do you want ideal to look like? What's the ideal place for your business? And then you work backwards. How big is the gap? What is the gap analysis? How much of a gap exists between where you are and where you want to get to? It's critical to be strategic and thoughtful, not reactive and scattershot. Answering questions like we have formulated what we call a best business life self-assessment, and answering questions like, what do you like about your firm? And how impactful is your firm in making you the success that you are? How bothered are you by the problems and frustrations, if any, that you and your team encounter at work? Are these frustrations minor annoyances, or is the sky falling? How confident are you in your pipeline and your growth? Because if you're not, no matter how frustrated you might be or how excited you are about another option, it definitely wouldn't make sense to move. Do you see yourself with your firm 5 or 10 years from now? How entrepreneurial are you? Do you have a desire to build your own firm? And if so, what would it look like? What would be its top attributes? Be sure you're not operating from an old playbook. Update your narrative. Make sure that you're not operating based upon old beliefs and myths. Make sure that your beliefs and knowledge about the industry are current and rooted in fact. Get educated. Again, doesn't mean I think you should make a move. I can't know that. That's only something you can know. That's an inside job. But the world's changed a lot. And if your knowledge of the industry landscape and what's driving movement is based upon an old narrative, perhaps you owe it to yourself to get it updated. Do a compare and contrast, even if it's only based on armchair exploration, and always begin with the end in mind, which also applies, by the way, to staying right where you are and assessing the direction your business is heading in. Meaning, where I am, do I need more support? Do I want to fire some clients? Is my partner still adding enough value? Do I like the location of my office? If you're a business owner, should I think about M&A? What's my end game? And does the status quo, whatever it is, allow you to solve for your succession needs? So, to wrap up, it's the most uncertain of times for sure. But I know one thing. I can only control what I can control. And when I begin with the end in mind, no matter what aspect of my life it is, but especially professionally, it's always my guidepost. So by deploying it and performing a gap analysis, I'm always steered in the right direction. Thank you for your time.